Well, Simon Marks is LBC's US correspondent. He joins us live from Washington. Another day, Simon. I don't know how you cope with it.
I'm doing the best I can, Ian. Look, I mean, it's absolutely apparent that he was referring to the UK and France. There is no other possible construction you can place on those comments by J.D. Vance. And I think it's also really important to understand the context in which they were made. First of all, he was sitting down for an interview with Sean Hannity, the big prime-time host on the Fox News channel, a programme absolutely, definitely watched on a nightly basis by President Donald Trump. That interview, from J.D. Vance's perspective, was being given largely for the benefit of an audience of one, namely the President of the United States. This is a vice president who has been absolutely eclipsed since Inauguration Day, January the 20th, by the de facto prime minister of this country, Elon Musk. And so he has become a vice president who has no real consistent ideology in his background. He's been very fluid in terms of what he has to say about things over the last several years. This is a vice president who has now repeatedly decided to double down in a bid to show to Donald Trump that he's the guy. He's got the stones, absolutely, to say all the outrageous far-right things that Donald Trump will say, so that if anything happens to Donald Trump, he's safe being a heartbeat away from the presidency. It started with the Munich Security Conference speech, which did not simply unsettle European leaders, as the New York Times here told American readers. It absolutely enraged them by J.D. Vance asserting that democracy and freedom of speech were backsliding in Europe at the very moment when democracy and freedom of speech are demonstrably backsliding here in the United States. Then, of course, Vance was certainly as outrageous in his behaviour towards Volodymyr Zelensky as Donald Trump was last Friday in the Oval Office, and arguably was the instigator in the mugging of Volodymyr Zelensky. Again, that appeared designed to secure Donald Trump's attention. And I think that this interview with Sean Hannity did that as well. The other point I would make, Ian, is that, you know, what he had to say about British and French troops was appalling enough. But it was also what he said immediately before that that was so revealing. He said that the best way to stop Vladimir Putin and provide real security guarantees in Ukraine is to give Americans economic upside in Ukraine. And that is code for get Zelensky to sign the minerals deal so we can extort Ukraine's minerals wealth while we continue making the entirely false premise that the United States is owed $350 billion by the Ukrainians, because that dramatically overstates the amount of aid that the United States has provided to Ukraine. And it also means we're absolutely not interested at all in providing the military security guarantees that Zelensky is demanding, and also those random troops from Britain and France, their commanding officers are also demanding.
And just a word about the State of the Union address. Is there any briefing about what Donald Trump might be saying in that?
Yes, I have to correct you. It's not a State of the Union address.
I thought it was.
A trivia buff like yourself, Ian, will appreciate this. It is a speech to a joint session of Congress. It's only a State of the Union address, for reasons I've never fully understood, in the second, third and fourth year of any presidential administration. The first one is just a speech to a joint session of Congress, and on the day in which the stock markets here have tanked and prices have started going up because of Donald Trump's trade war, we think he's going to tell Americans that a little bit of short-term pain is worth tolerating in order to bring about the crackdown on illegal immigration and fentanyl imports into the United States illegally, that he promised Americans on the campaign trail during the presidential election. So he's certainly going to double down, I think, on the trade war, at least over the short term, as he's done on social media again over the last few hours. As for what he says about Ukraine, what he says about Russia, what, if anything, he says about NATO, I mean, as with everything that we've seen since January the 20th, it is anyone's guess. We could be talking about literally anything tomorrow. None of it, I suspect, will obtain to a warming of relations between the United States and its transatlantic allies.
Now, Simon, I need your insight here, because James says, I have to ask Iain, do you regret shilling for Trump during his campaign? Now, you and I talked many times during that campaign. Do you recall who I said I would be voting for if I was an American?
I'm pretty certain, Iain, that it wasn't Donald Trump, that you had stopped shilling for Donald Trump long before the 2024 presidential election was ever in our mind's eye.
I never shill for Donald Trump, because right from the start of his first campaign, I said I'd never vote for him in a month of Sundays. I made very clear that I would be supporting Kamala Harris if I had a vote. So, Jason, I don't know where you've got that from. I don't know which other presenter you think I am, but it's not me, mate.